Hi, and welcome to the Built Different podcast. I'm your host, Jake, with Banyan Labs, and today we have Ashley Brooks with us, who is one of our developers. Ashley, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Jake?
I am excited about the opportunity to visit with you today about UpCurve. Ashley, as we get started, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. So my name is Ashley. I grew up in Huntington Beach, California. And actually in 2003, I moved to Gilbert, Arizona to go to school at
Awesome.
ASU. So I was a mom at 16. So I was just looking for a better opportunity for me and my daughter. And school is what I had in mind. And then, of course, the challenges of like motherhood, get in the way. And then it was more important to have a full-time job. So I
Yeah.
actually met my husband and ended up having two more children, my first husband, and had two additional children with him. We had some tragic events happen in our lives. He actually committed suicide. So then I was
Oh,
again a single mom with three kids now and no education, which is hard. So
yeah.
the struggle is real. So then after that, I just turned to alcohol, was my first addiction. And then it moved on to bigger and better things. Like I said, I was a single mom with three kids, struggling to keep a house and a
Yeah.
job and all them fed and all of that. My addiction turned more to drugs and alcohol. And then in 2021, I was actually sentenced to 5 years in Perryville State Penitentiary, where I served time. I was completely devastated. I feel like I lost my entire world, my kids, my house. I mean, everything that I ever
Yeah.
owned, that I ever worked towards, I lost. And I was in this prison and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, how I was going to change. I heard about the Persevere program and it was like, this is web development. It's a year-long program. And I'm like, I have that year, so I'm going to do it. I need some type of education was always like my biggest like goal in life is like, I need some type of education that I can fall back on. And so I signed up for the Persevere program. It was not what I was expecting it to be at all in any way. And was it what I was expecting it to be? But I instantly just felt I absolutely enjoy every minute of coding. People look at me like I'm crazy sometimes because they're like, what are you doing? Like, you understand this stuff. I'm like, it just clicks with me. So I absolutely enjoyed it. I got the privilege of being able to be in there for a year and a half because there was some people that dropped out of the class that I started in. So I was able to fill that spot. And then I got into the next cohort. So I actually got a year and a half of training. I had an
Awesome.
amazing teacher. Mr. Dean was an amazing teacher. He just went above and beyond to teach us the things that we know, and it was, I was building in that year and a half full blown websites, like I built so many websites. I mean, to the point where my last 2 weeks, it was like, oh, we need, like the new class had started and I had been in there for a while. So like, we want to build a shopping app, in Redux Toolkit. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this for you guys before I go home so that you guys can reference this when making your capstones. So it was a good way for me to be able to like give back to the new people coming into the program. I feel like Persevere saved my life. I
Yeah.
came home to, the OJT program and was able to get the on-the-job training and really just take my education with coding to the next level. And it's been wonderful. Like people think I'm crazy, but I'm like, I love the challenge. I love figuring it all out. I love trying the new programs. So it's definitely something that makes it feels more like a hobby to me rather than a job. It's something that every morning I wake up and I can't wait to get to my computer to start coding. And people are like, what? But that's what it is for me. So it's definitely, like I said, like a hobby. So
That's
I
awesome.
absolutely enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the things that we want to talk about today, Ashley, is your leadership for one of the products that Banyan has built, which is UpCurve, right? Which is um, a platform for giving and donation for individuals as well as institutions. We've received a lot of positive feedback about UpCurve. It was our first product that was in production. And so we're really proud of just the work that has gone into that, the work that you have done leading that team. So just talk to us. How did you come to be on the team that was architecting UpCurve?
Okay, so when I started the OJT program, we went through the process of building portfolios and capstones the landing pages and stuff. And then it was like, hey, we have this product. It was originally called Pass It On. And all it was at that time was a widget that people could use on their own web pages. And then the dashboard would just keep track of those donations, is pretty much what we were trying, or what they were trying to come up with. So I got asked to join the UpCurve team. At that time, it was just me and another lady, Megan, that was helping us on it. So it was kind of just the two of us. We worked really, really well together. We spent hours on calls and, video calls and, just trying to figure out, like, how can we take this to the next level? How can we make this like a product that people have to use and want to use?
Yeah.
So we were brought in like in the middle, in the middle of like legacy code is what we call it. So somebody else had built that widget and parts of the dashboard. So we got chosen to go in there and kind of vamp it up a little bit.
Yeah, awesome. So I want to bounce off of that. You mentioned that widget, and I know that one of the deliverables for that was that widget portability, right? So how did you wrap your mind around making something on the UpCurve site work on completely different websites?
Right, which was very challenging for me at first. I was like, "You guys want me to do what?" But I had a great group of like senior developers, point me in the right direction and really just like map it out for me. But it was completely amazing to me. I was like, you're gonna come on this site, create this, and then you're gonna go put it on your site and it's gonna work. Like, it was just like mind-boggling to me, but it's super cool. It works. It's like very easy, very user-friendly. It's very simple. I mean, and then the biggest thing too was like making it to where people could design it to match their brand. How can we make this widget fit into their webpage? And everybody has their own brand, colors, text, so we wanted it to be universal so that people could make it their own and then just,
Yeah.
place it somewhere on their webpage and it be able to track and keep all their donations in one spot. You can select different causes and just keep track, you can run different campaigns, and then that the UpCurve dashboard is going to keep track of all of that for you.
Yeah, for sure. So, for our audience who has never seen UpCurve, just give us like a brief overview of what it does and how it navigates.
Okay, so UpCurve was mainly built for like nonprofit organizations to be able to run campaigns and create widgets to help the flow of like donations easier for them. So with UpCurve, you sign up, you create your organization, you can create custom campaign pages. You can add, your story or what you guys are campaigning for. You can add your own photos, and you create these live web pages. When you click to go live, that page is live on the internet. It's live on the internet. You can share it on Facebook through UpCurve. You can share it on LinkedIn, X. You can share an email link, so that you can get the word out about your campaign. So that's super cool too, like the sharing options and like what's available there. But it's your own live webpage. It's pretty much UpCurve and then your campaign, title or name, and then you can share that with people. They can go directly to that page and donate. So that was definitely something that's very, user friendly, and like nonprofits need this. They need this
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
promote what they do, promote their business. It's important to, give back to your community, donate, like get the donation so that you can keep these nonprofit organizations going. You can invite team members, so if you've got a larger nonprofit organization and there's several different moving parts that different people are, collecting money for different things, you can invite team members. They can create campaign pages, and then everybody just kind of can see what the organization has going on as far as, campaigns and all
Yeah.
that. So that's a super cool feature. And then another thing, you can upload YouTube videos. So say you have, a YouTube
Cool.
video that's explaining like, hey, this is what we're raising money for. This is why, you can add that right there on that live fundraising page. So that's a
That's
super
awesome.
cool feature. And
Yeah.
then the biggest part of UpCurve, I guess, is our stacked momentum, which we came up with and created so that once you hit 50% of your goal amount that you're trying to come up with, we pretty much give back to that campaign. So There are fees included with like Stripe, and then you have the option to like tip UpCurve. And what that does is once you hit the 50%, all those fees that you're being charged or you're not being charged, they're getting put back into your campaign bucket or donation bucket. So that's a super cool feature. I haven't heard of any other website that does that. So that's kind of our way of giving back and allowing you to collect more money and reach that goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know that that's one of the hallmarks, right, of UpCurve is when you guys were investigating potential competitors and how those giving or donation platforms functioned, we saw a lot of those hidden fees and you really couldn't tell where they went. And so I know that we wanted to be different, right? So if a campaign has a target of $3,000. Once they reach that 1,500 mark, that 50% mark, then whatever that fee is, instead of coming back to us, it goes directly back into that campaign. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate Banyan's desire to architect it that way, right? Because we're wanting to show our audience, our listeners, people who participate in the products that we build and the software that we build, that we're not in this to make a dime, right? We're in because we also have a social mission and a social vision, right? And so I really, really appreciate that. Let's talk about the donor dashboard because that really seems like a big milestone from a technical vantage point. What made that challenging? You mentioned in our initial phone call that you thought it would take about a month, but it didn't, and it was easier than expected. So just kind of talk to us about that.
Right. So we created a donor dashboard to make it easier for people to make those donations and then be able to track their donations as well. So we have like an export CSV file, and this donor dashboard, keeps track of all the donations they've made throughout the year. It kind of gives them some graphs of like, hey, you've donated this much this month, you donated this much last month, and they're able to keep track of their donations. They can set goals, like some people, want to donate $1,000 a year to nonprofit organizations or some type of, cause. So we allow them to set like goals, and then it will keep track of like how many donations they've made ever over their lifetime of being part of UpCurve. And then it will also give them like that month's donations. So it's very helpful, again, for donors to be able to keep track of that. There's an option in there where they can select an organizations tab, and they can actually go through and look at every organization that has an active running campaign,
Oh,
on
that's cool.
UpCurve. So, if you want to look for some particular cause, you can look at that through the UpCurve dashboard and then just click on it. It will show all that nonprofit organizations campaigns, and then you can just select which ones you want to donate to. And the dashboard instantly updates, because it took me a little bit of time to figure out the legacy code that was in there, which the dashboard for the organizations was part of that legacy code. And so it took me a minute to figure out, like, what are they doing here? How are all these pieces fitting together? What is the flow? What is the flow of how this is working? So it did take us a little bit of time to figure that out. So I was thinking I was going to have to, go and do that process again with this donor dashboard because the functionality is a little bit different. But it
Yeah.
actually, I got it done in about 2 weeks.
Oh,
It
wow.
looks great. Yeah, it was super fast. I mean, I totally threw it out of the park when it comes to the donor dashboard. I was kind of intimidated at first. I was like, "Oh my god, I got to go create this whole new dashboard." But it was actually very simple. I mean, I think the main thing is I knew what I wanted when I started, so it was very easy to figure out like what part I needed to do first just to move forward.
For sure, for sure. So, one of the things that you mentioned early on, and I just want us to talk a little bit about this, you mentioned that one of the things that the platform can do is people can post photos or they can add YouTube videos, right? And I'm just thinking about that from a novice's development perspective, right? Because I'm not a developer, but I know that's a lot of tech debt, right? That can get expensive really fast, especially if you're hosting with AWS or whatever. So, how did you manage that kind of debt? How did you manage that kind of growth in UpCurve?
Okay, so we created like storage buckets. So like all of
Okay.
those
Yeah.
photos are stored like in a a photo bucket. The videos are stored in a bucket so that it's not taking up our space. And then another feature that we implemented in there was like once a campaign expires, it kind of drops off so that it's not, the website isn't overflowed with a bunch of different
Yeah,
campaigns that are no longer active anymore. They pass the date of when their campaign will expire, it drops off of the website so that all the campaigns on there are active and currently accepting
awesome.
donations. The users do have the capability of going in there and like restarting, their campaign. Like if they need a little bit more time or they've decided to extend it a little bit, they are able to see their previous campaigns in their dashboard. It does list all of them there. So they can go in there and like reactivate that. But if it is something, which is another thing that's kind of user friendly, like they don't have to, physically go in there and like delete all these campaigns because they're no longer running. We just kind of turn them off for them so that they're not just sitting on the website.
If UpCurve suddenly had, I don't know, like 10,000 active campaigns tomorrow, would the system be able to handle that? What would happen?
Absolutely. It would be able to handle it. We have just built it in a way that it would be able to handle it. It'd be able to take that traffic. Once I jumped into UpCurve, and we started calling it UpCurve, and it went from Pass It On to UpCurve because we had all these great ideas. We built it with the possibility of 10,000 users being on there one day.
Wow.
I mean, this is something that has the capability of like, GoFundMe, and really that's what we were trying to outdo was GoFundMe. GoFundMe is a huge, you know,
Yeah.
platform that, so that if we could go in there and offer people different fees and, do the stacked momentum, all these things. So it was definitely built with the idea in mind that, hey, hopefully one day we will have 10,000 users. I mean, that is definitely our
Yeah.
goal. Like we want 10,000 people on there.
For sure, for sure. So I want to switch to something that I think is really important, right? As a user, if I'm using UpCurve or GoFundMe or anything like that, one of the things that I'm always concerned about as a user is the security of the platform, right? How does UpCurve protect my information as a donor?
Okay, so we chose to use Stripe as our payment processor, and that is because of the security that Stripe offers. So all the donations are made through Stripe. They back up what's the word that I'm looking for? The security
Yeah,
of all donations. So that was why we chose to use Stripe. And then we also chose Clerk for our login and stuff. So or sign up, all that information is stored in Clerk, which has enormous security measures. So that was why we chose to use those two, was because of the security that they offer. So they have, the password two-step verification, authentication, if somebody logs into your account or attempts to log into your account from a different device, it's sending you that security code to make sure that it is you that's trying to log in. So that was why we chose Stripe and Clerk for those security risks.
yeah, awesome. I'm thinking about I think if our audience doesn't know, right, at Banyan Labs, we are a social enterprise of Persevere, which is a nonprofit that focuses on fair chance, justice impacted individuals and giving them targeted tech skills to enter the workforce, right? You and I are both graduates of that program. And so, how does it feel to work on a product that directly supports Persevere's mission?
It feels great. It actually makes me feel like I'm giving back to the community. I feel
Yeah,
like we are definitely doing something, to give back and allow and help these nonprofit organizations come up with the funding that they need to do these amazing programs. I feel
yeah,
like the programs that Persevere and Banyan Labs, have to offer are just amazing. I'll tell you 5 years ago I would have never in a million years thought that I would be a web developer, but I am and I love it. So, it's
yeah,
good to be able to like feel like you're giving back, you're trying
for
to help
sure.
in some way, like make it easier for people, that do run these nonprofit organizations and are trying to give back and help. It makes a big
Yeah.
difference. I am absolutely thrilled to be a part of it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I want to talk right because we're always in the software development space. Our job is never done. We're always developing, right? And as a third party for that, the majority of the work that I do is account solutions and marketing, but I get to see all of you guys in your natural environments working through and just listening to how your brains work. And it just baffles me. Shandia always says that it's like rocket science or listening to NASA, right? Just listening to the things
Yeah.
that you guys do. So UpCurve isn't done, right? I mean, it's in production, it's being used, we're proud of it, right? But what are you currently working on for UpCurve? What's on the roadmap?
Okay, so like next, our goal is to get some type of like blog or news feed at the bottom of these campaigns so that people can comment, like if Persevere was to run a campaign, hopefully some of the Persevere graduates will get on there and donate and be like, this program saved my life, like get the community involved, in these campaigns, so allow some type of, commenting or blog, like a news feed pretty much, whoever's putting on these campaigns can go up in there and update, like this is
Yeah.
where we're at. Come on, let's get, this much more, share this with your friends. So it's kind of like a news feed is what we're shooting for. So yeah, so like I said, so the community can get involved and see what, see what we're doing and, get other people to contribute, see that these funds are going to real, organizations that are really helping people, and even after the campaign is closed, for a little while, we'll leave it open to be able to be like, this is what we did with this money. This is where it went so that people can see that it's real life, it's real life. It's helping people. It's going to the next person in line. So that's what we're going to be working on next. The last feature that I did complete was for organizations to be able to invite donors. So that will be pushed up here next, but I felt like that was a super big component to this because people do go to like the ACA conference and they talk about how great our work is and oh my god, I want to help, I want to be a part of this, I want to be a part of this campaign. So it would be super easy to just get like an email list, from somebody and go in there and invite these donors, like come be a part of this,
Yeah.
process and donate, see what, other campaigns you can help with. So it's for organizations to be able to invite donors, and then they will get an email pretty much saying, hey, come join up. And then they can get on there and have access to all organizations.
That. I love that. When you look at UpCurve today, Ashley, what are you most proud of building? Right, so much has gone into it, but as a developer, like, what are you most proud of?
So I think I'm most proud of the fact that it's just live on the internet. I can go and be like,
Yeah,
"Hey, go check out this site. This is the site I built." That's the most proud part is like, "Whoa, it's actually live on the internet." Like I said, I've built tons of websites, but never really pushed
yeah,
them to the next level of like being live on the internet. Like anybody can go and use this. So I mean, that's
that's
super
awesome.
exciting. And then just to see it from beginning to end, once
Yeah,
we were ready to go and push that live, that was a whole different process. I was freaking out. We were getting these little ear, and then like Shandia and Matthew, like, listen, this is normal. Calm down. Don't freak out. This is completely normal. So it's just seeing the whole process was
yeah,
super amazing to me. And that was definitely, education that I got from Banyan Labs after the
yeah,
Persevere training, like when you're inside the walls, we don't have access to the internet. So we can't see the entire process from beginning to end. So it's amazing that, Banyan offers this OJT program because that's really the final step. That's the final
yeah.
step that we need so that we can go into society and into the real world, work a job, and be able to know what the process is from beginning to end.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think I know the answer here, but has working on UpCurve, has it made you a better developer?
It absolutely has. Absolutely has. I feel like, even especially at the beginning, coding can be a little bit intimidating at first. I'm losing that intimidation every day. But, like the biggest thing for me was like going into somebody else's code. The last OJT program was who created that widget in the dashboard. And so being able to go into that legacy code and like figure out what they were doing, like what, like I said earlier, like the flow. So I think that's a super important skill when it comes to, web development. Like, if you're all of a sudden needed on another team, it's like, hey, we need you to jump in and work on Harper. Like you have to be able to gain the skills and knowledge of being able to get into somebody else's code and figure out like what's going on. Everybody codes differently. There's no right or
Yeah,
wrong way to code. You can write the same line of code 5 different ways. So I think that it was very challenging at first, but then like a great accomplishment for me to be able to go in there and take the time to like figure out how somebody else coded and then be able to work off of that. So it,
yeah,
it definitely has given me like confidence, in my coding career here. It's definitely given me a lot of
Yeah.
confidence, to be like, "Hey, I did that." Like, I 100% jumped over that wall and did it.
Right. Yeah. So I have just two more questions before our time expires. And this one is not so much about UpCurve, it's more about people in the space. Right. Ashley, your story is so inspirational and transformative, right? You said, 5 years ago, you'd never thought that you'd be building things that are hosted on the internet that people are using, right? So, what advice would you give people who are just starting their coding journey? What do you want them?
Don't give up. I mean, coding is hard sometimes, like, there has been times where I've had to, like, be like, "I need to rethink my whole life. I can't do this. This is impossible," and then once you figure it out, you're like, "Yes, I just overcame that challenge." So, I mean, you're constantly learning. Even in the classroom, like, I don't know how many times I was like, "I don't know if this is for me," and then it was like, you get past that little hump and you're like, "Yes, I got this." So, I mean, I just would say don't give up. Like, do not
Yeah.
give up. My favorite meme is progress, new error. If you got an error on that screen and you do something and then you have a new error, that's progress. So
I love
just
it. I love it.
don't give up. You just got to keep going. You will figure it out. Having mentors and stuff like Banyan offers here is a great way, and sometimes, like the rubber ducky effect, like sometimes you have
Yeah.
to just like say it to your rubber ducky. Sometimes saying it out loud will be like, that's what I need to do. So it's just don't give up, you'll figure it
For
out.
sure.
And there's definitely, tons of help and people that, have been doing this for 25 years they're all so willing to help teach and help you learn and help you grow. So I would just say don't give up. Just keep going. It gets easier, but you know what? Then they change the programming language and you got to learn it all over again. So I guess that's the
Yeah,
challenge I live for.
for sure, for sure. Thank you so much for that. I love that. And one last thing, Ashley, we're coming up on April, which is Second Chance Month, and as justice impacted individual working for Banyan and for Persevere, right? That resonates close to our hearts. Um, what does second chances mean for our communities from your perspective?
I think second chances are so important. If I wasn't given the second chance that I was given, I mean, I don't even know where I would be. Second chances are just important. Like, if you want our community to change, if you want it to do better, like, some of these people that fall into addiction or get into trouble, like, that does not define who they are. It is not who
Yeah,
they are,
yeah,
but that also comes into play with those people. Like, who do you want to be? And you have to set those goals and go for them, but there are tons of super smart people that just didn't get the start that everybody else did, like
yeah,
there's geniuses, behind those walls. And I think unless if somebody's willing to put in the time and give them that second chance, they just end up right back where they were to begin with because it's all they know. So we need to be able to give these people a different direction in life, give them hope, give them confidence, lead them on, egg them on, let them know that they're perfectly
yeah,
capable of doing this. I mean, I thought that I had destroyed my whole life, and
yeah,
I am a completely different person than I am today. I feel like I'm a better person than I was 5 years ago, but I worked really hard for that. And I think, the people that are asking for those second chances, like that are going the mile to find that second chance, it all depends on like what they do with it, like what are you going to do with it? Like, I mean,
yeah,
I've only been home for a year, really, and it's like the goals and the things that I have set up and achieved in that time, but that's because of all the help and the people that I had around me that were willing to give me a chance
yeah,
and help me learn, continue to keep teaching me. So second chances are just super important for our whole entire community.
yeah.
People can change, people can
Yes.
change. And that's the bottom line of that they can change. And 95% of the time they do want better for their life. It's just they don't know how to get it. So, the more
For
people that
sure.
they have along the way to guide them in the right direction and give them that second chance, it's like super important.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for
You're
your
welcome.
wisdom, for sharing about UpCurve and all of the great things that are happening. I am excited for our audiences to see what it holds, and I just really appreciate you spending some time with me today so much.
No problem. Anytime, Jake.
If you're listening and you're interested about UpCurve or about Banyan Labs, you can visit us at banyanlabs.io, check our products page, and look at UpCurve. If you're interested in learning how you can add that widget to your own website, You can visit us there. You can email me. You can email Ashley, right? And we will get you set up. Thank you so much for being with us today. Ashley, thank you so much. And I hope to see you soon. Bye
You
bye.
too, Jake. Bye bye.